Welcome to another Artis Opus tutorial. Today we are covering chipping and battle damage. I painted this guy a while back and people were really impressed with the chipping that I had on his armor. A lot of people asked me how I did it. I'm going to be giving you all the information you need to take something up to that level, beyond that level, or even make a army ready rough version of it. I bashed these bases out in the tutorial. I spent some time getting to the point where I do the chipping. We'll go through that pretty fast. The most important part of this is the chipping. The one single most important thing about this tutorial is I'm talking about poking, not stroking. So stroking is traditional brush use. You know, you're wiping down a model with the body of your brush, getting these smooth flowing lines. We are not about smooth flowing lines whatsoever in this one. It's about getting, harsh edges on your chipping, and for that reason going at 90 degrees rather than closer to 45 is a really important part of the tutorial. You hear me banging on about it loads. So that's it, let's jump in. It's been a while, got some Huldra blue on the palette, got a little bit of a low 950 black. I've given the bases a quick Monitorum varnish, and this wash should hopefully add some pretty much instant depth to those metallics. Now, because we put them over a blue base and there's a hint of blue in them, we should keep them nice and coherent, and hopefully the entire effect that we get overall is pretty tasty. Just diluted with water. There's no medium in here, but you could absolutely use some medium if you wanted a smoother result. Would increase your drying times a little bit. Just going to slap a quick filter down on these kind of minty turquoisey sections. This is very much thinned down Huldra blue, just with water. And because the Monitorum varnish, it should, there you go, you can see it's behaving slightly strangely. That's just as we're trying to break that surface tension that's been altered as a result of putting down something slightly shiny. Hopefully we should be able to get over it. You can always get around this by using a heavier wash. Just takes a little bit longer to dry. As with any basing, if you do have a mistake and it's something you don't feel you can fix, you can just make sure that that's where you weather it particularly heavily later. Super, fundamental top tip with basing there, and with modeling in general. If you've got the opportunity to do some weathering, you can hide anything that you screwed up. For the other base, I'm just going to slap down a bit of Agrax, mix it with a blue that I've got on my palette, because why not? And then the thicker nature of Agrax should make sure that we don't get as much of an issue with the kind of coating over a Monitorum shiny base coat. It'll pick out details nicely for us too. Now, as far as the color for the chipping goes, I've only got one tip here, and that is to not use pure black ever. I say that there might be some exceptions on silver or something like that, but you can see here I've gone from a mid-brown. I've pulled some of my black in, but even if you want it to be really dark, please use black and something else. You'll reap the benefits pretty much instantly. So I'm using an M here because I want something nice and stubby and short, and make sure I don't have too much on the brush, but what I do have is quite wet, and you don't want to use any paints that don't have good coverage for this. You need something that, the moment you've touched an area, you've got perfect coverage on. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start concentrating on the edges, the bits where you would get wear and tear. I'm going to start trying to make some organic chipping shapes. Now with a shorter brush, it's a bit easier. One tip is it's a bit easier using shorter brushes like M, but if you do want to get details like this and you don't want them to look like brush strokes, rather than using them at an angle like this, go in pretty much down, use your brush a bit more like a pen. And that will help you get away from brush strokes that are noticeable. So basically, I'm just going to continue like this over the entire base. The most important thing with anything like this is to try and make it look organic, to try and make it look random. So one way to ensure that, I think, is to jump around the model a lot and fill in gaps. So it's very easy if you go down this side, then you turn it around and you go down this side, to do pretty much the same thing both ways. So what I'm doing here is I'm hopping around the miniature, the base in this occasion. And I'm even purposely jumping ahead and doing little bits in front of the sequence that I'm doing that don't fit with it, to try and make sure that I can maintain a lack of uniformity. You know, normally we're going for coherency and things matching and that type of stuff. In this instance, I'm going for the opposite. So I'm trying to make sure that this stuff looks like natural wear and tear, but natural wear and tear doesn't, you know, it doesn't follow rules. Apart from the fact that it's going to be concentrated on edges, or, you know, let's say you were going up some stairs or something like that, you'd have more wear in the middle and the edges, stuff like that, that you do need to consider. You're really just trying to imagine a lack of consistency onto your miniature here. Some areas will just, you know, tie right into stuff that we've seen thousands and thousands of times in our life, and that pattern will look like wear and tear. So here where we've got a recess, normally of course we'd want our recesses to be darker. Generally that's where, you know, you'd be shading or dirt would be collected. Here in this section, that kind of lightness in the background and the chipping at the raised edges of it, that should be something that it really obviously, you know, lets us know that we're looking at heavy natural weathering. As I said, one way to you know, make the most of the fact you're doing basing is that you can hide your mistakes with the weathering. So here where my base coat for the metallic sections worked its way onto the deck tan section, I'm just conveniently going to hide all of that with a particularly weathered section of the base. You might find something that works particularly well for you. I kind of end up holding the two together and doing this a lot. It's very exaggerated, but that's the type of motion I use with my hand. Maybe for you it's getting right down on your desk, getting it close to your face, whatever it is, you'll find a way that works particularly better for you. So exactly as per the previous one, I'm going to do this pretty much all over the base. And one thing that you should be mindful of that I haven't been already is that you need to make these slightly bigger, because if you're going to be doing stuff within them, you have to have space to do that. Now, you don't need to be doing it within all of the sections, but you do at least need to have some bits where you can do chipping within your chipping, like that, because I'm going to struggle to get anything between the edge of the base and that tiny line there. So, right, let's cover this and see where we can get it. Okay, so this is quite hard to demonstrate on camera. I've actually stepped down to a 0M, which is the smallest brush you've probably ever seen me using on the channel. It's not often I do stuff like exactly of this nature. So I have ended up, when I'm not on camera, basically doing it like this. Interestingly, that's pretty close to how David Soper paints, and he is the master of pointillism and stippling. So of note, his stippling doesn't look like stippling, it's that good. So basically, it's kind of like a woodpecker. So I'm just tapping it straight point down and trying to imagine some slightly random patterns into being. And the more point down and the more tap, 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 tap you are, the easier it is to get organic patterns rather than, you know, things that look like edge highlighting. And it's very easy to fall into old habits because this is a very different way of painting. That is the effect of both of them done in, you know, appropriate colors for their base coat color. Now, if you want to chip within them, you can chip within it with metallics. So this one in particular, I could go straight to metallics because they cover nicely over dark colors. And then this one, I could actually use probably without the black being mixed into it. Just this kind of charred and granity color that we've got here. And essentially what you do is you try and chip within your previous chipping. This is why it needs to be deep enough for it to be able to fit in there. And that is it. So after you've done the first one carefully, the second one is smaller and more delicate, but in some ways easier because you're literally just, you know, fitting it in your previous stage. So I'm going to do the entire lot of this with this color within our previous highlight, and then I'll do some metallics on this one. Top tip here, now this may sound obvious, but it's easy to forget when you're in the middle of things and you're trying to get stuff at different angles. If you're right-handed, you will have a better side for gaining access to models. If you're left-handed, you're going to have a better side. So if you're right-handed, it's the right. If you're left, it's the left. Make sure that you're turning particularly given how delicate these tasks are, I mean, you're trying to fill in tiny areas like this. Make sure that you're always going in from the correct side at the correct angle and turn your model appropriately. Don't change what this hand's doing. This is your delicate hand that's doing, you know, the most difficult stuff that you can. This one, just hold it at the right angle and then use that to gain access at the right angle, and you'll make your life a lot easier and your end result will be far more crisp. Obviously this is pretty time consuming, but it does get easier as you go, and I found that I was kind of developing a nice stuttering motion to fill these in more organically and, you know, with less kind of concentration needed as we go. Results speak for themselves though, looks hyper realistic. Now, doing this with metallic, so you can do this in one stage, you can do it in 2 stages, you don't even have to do this whatsoever. As with a load of our tutorials, you know, it's up to you how far you want to take this stuff. So if I mix myself up a dark kind of bolt gun metal here, I will show you a couple of steps how the chipping with metallics would work. Now, if you're doing this in one stage, maybe you choose a brighter one, but if you're doing it in multiple stages, how you go is you try your best to make a pretty dark silver. You know, adding black, adding brown, adding your previous color is never a bad bet for coherency. Nice thing about metallics is they tend to cover so well if they involve silver and black together, that you don't have any issues with coverage. So you work your way like that. And then with a far brighter, much purer silver, you chip within your chips. Now it's really important that your previous silver was dark enough that you can see a difference between the two. Otherwise it's just not worth the time doing. So perhaps I should have darkened my previous silver a little bit there. But that is the idea behind doing metallic chips. Obviously I've been a little bit slapdash with this stuff down here, so maybe a wash could have fixed that, but I think we can just about get away with that. So this is one of the few fancy models that I had time to do last year, and hopefully within this, let me get a pointy brush, you can see this stuff put to the test at a pretty decent level. So within here, if we can focus, what we have is we've got obviously the yellow armor, and then I've done a bright yellow initial chipping, a dark red chipping within that, and then a bolt gun, dark silver chipping within that, and then a couple of dots of this light silver. So this is like 4 stage or whatever. Obviously that's not particularly practical on an army scale whatsoever, but I was enjoying painting this guy, and I do enjoy chipping actually. I find it far more enjoyable than edge highlighting for some reason, perhaps because it's harder to go wrong, or you can hide mistakes more easily. But he turned out really, really nicely, and you can do this to whatever extent you want. You can just do one of these stages, do 2 of them. You can kind of do it at a much faster level on larger areas. You can do some scrapes and scratches, anything like that, and you can even highlight under those scrapes and scratches to suggest, you know, lighting and things like that. So if you are doing multi-stage chipping, one of the most important things to consider is, do you have enough difference between your layers for them to show up? Otherwise there's no point doing them. So for instance here, I'm chipping with just the pure bright silver. I probably, if I was going to be doing this, you know, if this was my plan from the start, I should have had my brown layer have a little bit more black in it, and then we'd end up with more contrast between the brown and the silver chips. Just something to note, you know, if you are going to be putting stuff down over each other on a very small scale, make sure you consider these things, as you don't want to waste your time if you're putting a load of effort in. They turned out super, super solid. Really pleased with those. Popped some orange down there for contrast. Some areas were better than others, and it definitely took me a little bit of time to warm up on these. Like genuinely, about halfway through the first base, I was going more at 90 degrees, more poking, less stroking, and it made a really big difference. And I was using kind of a stuttering motion as well. So don't be disheartened if at first it doesn't go absolutely perfectly. Don't worry about it. It's weathering anyway. You know, you could cover it with some pigments or something if you don't like it, or have a really weathered section, or fix it with your second step, or whatever you're doing. You can do as many stages as you want. I always say this, but I'm trying to give you enough information so that you can come away from this and be like, right, I want to do 7-stage chipping. Mentalist, but I mean, you could do that conceivably if you wanted to. Or you could be like, I want to do 1 stage, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix that granity color with a pretty shiny metal, and I'm just going to do it the fastest way I possibly can. All of these methods work really well with, you know, streaking, pigments, anything like that you can think of, and you can get a really amazing result. It's not fast, but I actually think this is pretty enjoyable. It's especially enjoyable if you're doing it on a slightly larger scale. So if you have something, you know, conveniently to hand, like this. You can even do sponge weathering or kind of removal techniques using chipping mediums, and then you can dot and detail within those. So as ever, it's absolutely a great idea to combine it with whatever techniques you need, whatever techniques you've got in your arsenal or are your specialty, or you've already got in your army you need to kind of tie things together with. So I hope you found it useful. Any questions, pop them below. Suggestions for future content. If you like, me doing some more type of detailed work, then by all means let us know and I will concentrate more on it in the future. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please like, comment and subscribe, hit that bell notification, and I'll see you very soon.